With me, I have Yiftah Shapir, the director of the Military Balance Project at the Institute for National Security Studies here in Tel Aviv. Thank you very much for joining us here in RT.
You're welcome.
When we sat down together a couple of weeks ago, you said it was not in Israel's interest to launch a military strike on Iran. Why do you think Israel should not strike Iran?
I don't think that Israeli Air Force is large enough, is strong enough to actually destroy the Iranian nuclear weapon project. It might cause damage, some damage, but it would not destroy it. So it would not achieve anything.
Do you think that the US would consider cooperating with Israel in such a strike, but quietly?
First of all, there is no quietly in this issue, because things would tend to come out sooner or later. So to begin with, on the one hand, I think President Obama has not ruled out an American strike yet, even though his military is very reluctant to get into another war in the Middle East. I don't think he would do it during an election year.
So can't that be a reason for Israel to launch a strike now, before there's a new American leadership in place?
There is, and I think there is a fear in the United States that that is what we are going to do, that an Israeli attack might draw the United States into that war, probably prematurely. It would force the United States to get into a war, because an Iranian counterattack would almost undoubtedly be targeted against the United States as well as against Israel. So the United States will be drawn. This would cause, I think, such an action without an American consent would cause a great damage to Israel's relations, strategic relations with the United States for an extended period of time.
Do you think that the harsh sanctions recently declared against Iran are enough to satisfy the Israeli government not to launch a strike?
They might satisfy it for the time being. I think the general attitude in Israel is that the sanctions are not enough, and they are not going to convince Iran. Even if they would be much harsher, it would not convince Iran not to continue, not to pursue its nuclear weapon project.
How do you measure Iran's capability to launch a counterattack?
Iran has a capability of launching missile attack on Israel, direct attack on Israel, with few hundred Shihab missiles. What would be the effectiveness of such an attack? What is the accuracy of these missiles? I don't know. I don't suppose we would be worse off than we have been in 1991, when we were under Iraqi missile attack. Damage was caused, no one actually got killed, but there is no guarantee that that is not going to happen. We have now the Arrow, which we didn't have then, which would be able to intercept at least some part of these attacks, missiles attacks. And the greatest damage would be, as in the case of the Katyusha rocket attacks, the economic damage to Israel, because under such attack everything comes to a standstill.
What about Arab support for an Israeli strike on Iran? You mentioned American involvement, but surely Israel also needs Arab assistance in the form of landing rights and even fueling assistance.
Many Arab countries are very cautious of Iran, and they are, for example, Saudi Arabia has been urging the United States to attack Iran for many years now. They are terrified. They really are terrified. On the other hand, assistance to Israel is still out of the agenda in the open. Israel would have to fly over Arab countries, and it has done so before, and it can be done without their consent or with their covert consent. We could get assistance or landing rights from countries like, I don't believe Saudi Arabia would do it, but the United Arab Emirates might do that. Just remember that the distance from the United Arab Emirates to northern Iran is as far as from Israel, maybe even longer. So this kind of landing rights would be helpful only in case of attacking targets in southern Iran. Another covert aid might be, but again it's problematic, might be given by Azerbaijan, which is on the north side of the Iranian border. They have now good relations with Israel. Trouble is that to get from Israel to Azerbaijan you have to overfly Turkey, and at the moment I don't see, with the current relations between Israel and Turkey, I don't see the Turks giving Israel any aid.
If we look across the border at Syria, why is Syria so important for Western nations? Could it be that it's the last obstacle before an invasion of Iran?
That is a tough one. Why Syria is important? Is it important? I mean, to the Western state? I don't see any Western country intervening in Syria as they did in Libya.
Yet there is so much attention and focus on Syria, and particularly on the President Bashar Assad's handling of the situation. So how do you explain that?
Well, that would be expected from the West. It's much closer to Europe, and with traditional relations. Syria had traditional relations with countries like France. And when such atrocities take place, I mean, they cannot stay quiet.
Is there a connection between what is happening in Syria and what is happening in Iran?
Well, there is a connection, or obvious connection, because Syria has been, and the Assad regime has been Iran's closest ally for over 2 decades. I mean, this is the main route of Iran into Lebanon, into the whole region, into influencing Israel. If Assad's regime falls apart, Iran is standing to lose a very strong ally, because any government would take the government in Syria, whether it be a Western aligned democracy, which is not very likely, or Muslim brothers who are Sunnis, who are very hostile to Shiite Iran. Any regime would be either hostile to Iran or far from cooperating with Iran as much as Bashar Assad's regime has been. So Iran is standing to lose.
Is the alleged supply of weapons to the Syrian opposition enough to upset the regional arms balance?
Right now, no. Right now, what I hear, I think Saudi Arabia started to supplying them with weapons, but we are talking about light weapons. So this, as long as that is what is happening, I don't think this would change the balance of power in the Middle East. They're still very weak.
Is it possible that there can be simultaneous interventions in Syria and Iran?
Doesn't seem likely. I don't see the European Union or NATO going into Syria, and I don't see the European Union or NATO taking part in an attack against Iran. This could be, NATO could, well, the United States could try to draw the Europeans into attacking targets in Iran. Doesn't seem very likely.
Yiftah Shapir, thank you very much for joining us here on RT.
You're welcome.